Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Nettie Owens, and today I've brought Sarah Elkins, Chief Storymaker of Elkins Consulting, to talk to us about leadership storytelling. And I'm really excited about this topic. I had the wonderful privilege to be on Sarah's podcast, and we just hit it off and got talking about storytelling and strengths finders and other ideas, and we probably could have gone on forever. So I said, come on over to my show and we'll talk a little bit more there, and then we'll probably have some conversations that we don't record for everybody at another time too. So I hope you are excited to get to learn from Sarah. She is a guide to individuals and audiences to help them share their stories that demonstrate character, values, vision, making them more inspiring leaders wherever they sit. And I love how you say that, because you can be a leader no matter what your title is at work or at home. We all have a leadership role to play. So welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
I'm going to just jump right into our conversation today. We're going to be talking about leadership storytelling. And I have a question before I ask you the questions that we talked about. Why storytelling? What got you excited about storytelling? And I apologize, because to everyone here, I am absolutely putting Sarah on the spot. So.
No, that is the best question. And if I couldn't answer that on the spot, I wouldn't be very good at what I do. So let's just start with, when I worked for a city, and I worked for a city manager that I didn't always agree with, I didn't respect a whole lot. I had some concerns about the decisions he made related to whether anything that he was saying was going actually to improve our community in any way, or the people that worked for him. And one day we were in a budget meeting, and all the commissioners and the mayor are sitting around the table with the directors of the departments in the city. And two of the commissioners decided, I don't know exactly where they came up with this, but somehow the city employees were making too much money in the context of the budget.
Oh.
And I can tell you, none of the city employees in our little city are making too much money. And if anything, now 5 years later, we're finding that we're having a hard time recruiting because of that. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I remember watching my boss get more and more angry, and it got pretty hostile in the room. They were, insistent that we relook at our city salary matrix, which is absurd. And all of a sudden, I saw my boss slam his hand against the table. And He said, I am not letting you balance the budget on the backs of my employees. You could have heard a pin drop in that room. It got silent. And then somebody was facilitating and the meeting got back on. But I remember this instant change in my relationship with him, because he demonstrated something so caring, so brave, that I had never seen that in him. Mm-hmm. And you could tell all the directors in the room were surprised to see that, because I had never seen him erupt like that. He was a pretty conscious guy. Right. So, so leadership storytelling, any kind of storytelling. The story I just told not only gave you an insight into me and what matters to me, it also gave you an insight into this man that you've never met. So when I've told this story in front of an audience for a servant leadership event, for example, everyone in the room, I would ask them, okay, so what words come to mind when you think about this man that I just described through the story? And tell me about Ron. And people say things like integrity and a leader and caring and brave, courageous, those big value words. And I have to remind you, those words are the ones that come to your mind, but I have to remind you that I just told you a story about him. So you're using these words about a man you've never met based on one story that a woman you've never met just told you.
Right.
So if you're wondering about the power of storytelling, there you go.
Nailed it. Yeah, absolutely. So you just gave a wonderful example, and it's illustrative, which is the whole point of stories, right? To illustrate a concept and an idea. How does that pair with leadership? What where do they mesh?
Well, I can tell you just recently I was working with an individual coaching client who is an executive in the DC area. And his biggest concern was that he wanted to tell personal stories to demonstrate his leadership, to demonstrate what matters to him, but he didn't want to sound like he was bragging.
Mm.
So leadership storytelling is a critical part of inspiring people. People have to know what matters to you. And you can say things like, my community matters to me, or my
Mhm.
employees matter to me. But unless you're demonstrating those things, either directly so people can witness it, like I did of my boss,
Mhm.
or through the stories that you tell. So as a leader, if I tell stories about my employees and the compassion that they demonstrate, the innovation that they demonstrate, the things they do that demonstrate what matters to them, that automatically tells people what matters to me. And
Right,
that's what
because we
inspires.
wouldn't talk about the things that don't matter to us. So if we're talking about it, by default, it means that it matters to us
Exactly.
without having to say, this is what matters to me, which is less impactful. I mean, science shows us that when we come to the awareness on our own, then we believe it more. So the
Yeah.
story
Well,
gives us that opportunity.
exactly. If I say I'm a compassionate person or I'm a generous person, that doesn't make it true. It
Hmm.
doesn't make it compelling.
Right. Wow. Now my wheels are turning. Thinking about
Hey, that's the
thinking
goal.
about stories I've heard and all of that. So I feel like you've really answered the why storytelling matters part of this. And are there any other examples that you can give maybe that of where storytelling could be applicable in the leadership space or business space?
Well, I always tell a story to demonstrate what I want somebody else to know about me or what I want somebody to know about themselves.
Mhm.
So one of my taglines is your strengths are your stories. And that is based on the Strengths Finder work that I do. I
Mhm.
could have used any of the accurate assessments that are out there, but I chose Strengths Finder because of the way it's presented,
Mhm.
because it's about telling someone what their magic is. So as a leader, I have to encourage and build people's skills, right? I have to help them develop into their own self leaders,
Mhm.
and then they can lead others. So that's how we build a sustainable organization. So when I think about a client that I'll work with, for instance, I'll look at their StrengthsFinder results and I'll ask them to tell me stories about things they found really satisfying. And the key to that, and I think I am going to answer one of my other questions that you were going to ask me, the key to that is good listening.
Mhm.
So storytelling isn't just about me wanting to demonstrate who I am to you. It's also about listening well enough to understand what matters to the person in front of me. And again, the best way to do that is to uncover one of their stories. And you experienced that when we did the podcast, when I would
Mhm.
ask a question and then I would find a part of your story that you kind of maybe glossed over that I understood to be a more pivotal piece, a more critical piece of that puzzle than you were acknowledging in the moment.
Mhm.
And that's what we can do with with the management around us, with the people that we want to build to be leaders. We find out what they're really, really good at, and we develop that. We make them even better at it so that the team becomes extraordinary and a diverse set of stories, a diverse set of strengths.
What stands out for me here is the answer to the question that your client asked about how do I tell stories without bragging is in what you just shared, is that you make sure that you're listening so that the stories that you tell are part of a greater contextual framework and that um, they're not just stories that you apply. These are my stories and these are the stories I always tell, but they're put in place with everything else that's important to you and is important to the people around you. And I would think that there's probably some damage that could be done by telling stories out of context or without that framework, or, without that nuance, without listening and understanding who you're speaking, who you're telling the story to. So.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, when you think about it, how many people have you heard tell the big epic "I almost died" stories, right? Or the stories of from devastation to heroic event, right?
Mm-hmm.
We hear the big stories, and sometimes there's a place for that. There's all kinds of entertainment value in those stories. The damage happens when you're telling those stories and you're not telling the incremental improvement stories.
Okay.
You're not telling the stories that include other characters that helped as either the guide, or maybe the hero wasn't you in the story. Maybe the hero was your guide.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the hero was somebody else that you empowered to become the hero. Maybe you were the guide. So yeah, all kinds of damage can happen if you're only telling the stories that make you the hero, or you're only telling the stories that are only about you and you don't have other characters in it. How is that going to inspire somebody else to do something different, or to help somebody else, to advocate for somebody else? Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of damage that can be done in telling the wrong story at the wrong moment.
This has been so interesting and such a good continuation. I feel like I'd like to guide people to listen to your podcast. You have an amazing and beautiful podcast that you share. They can access that podcast directly from your website, elkinsconsulting.com. So I encourage our listeners to please make today a 2-for-1. Listen to Sarah's podcast, and thank you for being here and participating with us today as well. If you would like to learn more about Sarah, about what she does, if you'd like to contact her about your story or about her strengths, because that's another one of her amazing strengths, you can go to elkinsconsulting.com. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Just that tagline. It's the name of the podcast and the name of my book, because I think it's so imperative to people. Your stories don't define you. How you tell them will. That's it. Thank you so much for hosting me, Nettie.
I'm so glad that you were able to come on. This has just been such a pleasure to have you. Thank you to all of our listeners today. If you are a business owner and you are looking to grow or scale your business, I encourage you to take a moment today, take out your phone and text the word freedom to 411-321. I've put together a guide, The Proven Path to Success for High Achievers, and you can access it here by texting freedom to 411-321. Take care, and we'll see you next time.